Good evening. My name is Summer and I'm a real alcoholic. Welcome to Spiritual Life is Not a Theory, Big Book Compendium's deep dive, Big Book study on Friday night. Tonight we have a special guest with us, Nicoletta. I have watched her speak, heard her speak, listened to her speak, went back and listened again. I love her shares. She's spoken for Big Book Compendium a couple times, I mean, quite a few actually, probably. And her heart and her passion for AA and for what this program offers just exudes from her. So I was honored when she said yes, and she said she would join me this Friday night. And I want to give her the opportunity to introduce herself as well and tell us anything that you want to tell us, and then we'll dive right into page 50.
Thank you, Summer. My name is Nicoletta. I'm an alcoholic. Uh, I'm just a grateful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the big book. I love reading the big book. It does get me fired up. So I'm excited to see what happens tonight as we read in the chapter We Agnostics. My sober date is September 15, 2006. And I don't know. Let's just go for it.
All right, that sounds perfect. All right, and welcome Scott and welcome Jimmy T. And I think that's all that have entered. Just so you all know, we are on page 50 at the top in the middle of We Agnostics. Last week we covered a lot of cool things. We were talking about faith and how we have faith in other things besides our higher power, and we put our faith in those things. And so we have the ability and we have faith. So when we say we don't have faith, that's not really, it's what do we have faith in? And so we were kind of on a cliffhanger on 49 because I don't know, it was just, it would have been good to move on, but we didn't have time. So I'm going to begin to read, and it's at the top, at the very top, and then Nicoletta, I'll ask you to share. We'll just read like a paragraph or half a paragraph. We'll see where it goes. All right. Instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes use their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. All right, Nicoletta, I'd love to hear from you.
Just go right into it.
Go right in. Yeah. Dive right in.
All right. I mean, what's the first thing that pops up for me as we just like off the bat read on page 50? I mean,
Mm.
we're in We Agnostics chapter. I mean, for me, step two was a step, stepping into the unknown, really. And it was also about like not fighting this idea of God, not fighting like other people's ideas of God, like just not really getting information from the mind. When I read this paragraph, I think about what I was like back then, but I also kind of check myself on if I'm like this. Am I doing this today? Am I judging? Am I looking at the shortcomings of others and then, wholesale condemning anything or anyone or any institution or anything like that? I do remember this line in the book more often than not. So it's a line that really sticks with me. We miss the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. And I mean, that's just kind of like life is like plus and minus, black and white, good and bad, all of these like superficial like ideas of the way I see life and the way I narrate life. And I think back then, when I wanted to get a point across or be right, I needed to manipulate what I was seeing to be true at all times for everyone, everywhere, basically. But I think we got to get into it a little bit more because I mean, when I read this back in the day, first time when I was a newcomer, I'll tell you that I could admit freely that I never gave um, a spiritual side of life a fair hearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We got to get into it a little more. That one line though, like that always stood out to me that we missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness. I mean, how many times did I find the negative in other people, in other situations, in other circumstances and I missed the big picture. It was all about perspective, right? Like I would see like these one things, like the speck in someone else's eye, but I forgot that I had like a big log in mine, right? And it was like I mean, not even always intolerance, but I talked of other people as, judgmental, but I was judgmental myself. I talked of other people as being, faithless or not trusting or petty or, they're the gossiper, but as I gossip right out of my mouth, right? I'm talking about someone else being a gossiper and I'm talking gossip, right? So that's what I thought of when we were going through this. And yeah, so thank you, Nicoletta. All right, I'm going to continue on. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. Reading this paragraph, it's like it's really not about, it's not my business about what someone else's higher power is, right? Like it's not my business what yours is, or like I can't judge your relationship with your higher power or who your higher power is. That really makes no difference. And in the big scheme of things, like as we do step two, like it's about being willing to be willing to be willing to find a higher power, right? Like it's not, I know when I was on step two, I didn't have I had I didn't know. Like I just was following my sponsor's lead. She was saying, pick out words in We Agnostic that have capital letters. And, those are examples of what your higher power could be. And like, I had no idea. So, we can't look at what other people's higher power is unless, we want to, unless our sponsor shares with us or something. But these questions are for each individual to settle for ourselves. And I mean, I think that's appropriate as well. Do you have anything else, Nicoletta?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like it didn't matter what I thought about God. It didn't matter what you thought about
Hmm.
God. This was really about it was I willing to have an experience? And
Yeah.
I needed to kind of move in a way with anything that would relax the mind. Anything that would relax the mind. I mean, this whole chapter is really about laying aside prejudice and staying willing. And I think that that willingness is born out of like that step one experience. Like I'm cornered, I'm defeated, I'm broken open, I have no place to go, I don't know which way to turn, I've tried everything, I tried to manage, I tried to control, I tried to drink like a lady and think like a lady. I tried to, all of that. And it's just like it left me, empty and lonely and alone and drunk and on death's door. And like I come into this, and even though it sounds radical and I don't like it and I don't particularly agree with it and I don't know what they're talking about, like I'm willing to take that step and see if I can have an experience. And I think that I'm also relying on your guys' experience.
Yeah.
It's the experience of others, right? Other members in Alcoholics Anonymous were giving me an experience that I lacked. Your fate was my fate. Your experience was my experience when I had none with this. You were an example of what's possible, what was available. And that created enough curiosity. And I love the freedom that the book gives us with you don't need my God, you don't need to believe in this and that. None of that is necessary for you to have this experience, for you to have to yeah, I mean, have this experience. Experience is such a great word. I mean, the chapter is called We Agnostics. I didn't really have an experience with this. All I had an experience was in trusting my mind. And I knew where that brought me, right? So this was really about getting information from some other place than the mind. The examples of what I was seeing in Alcoholics Anonymous and the willingness to believe that this was maybe possible for me.
Hmm. Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, moving on. We are, for all of you that just came in, hi, welcome Howard, welcome Kathy. Um, Welcome everyone that arrived that I might be missing. We are in the middle of page 50 on the paragraph where it says on one proposition. So on one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. I think I'm going to keep reading. What do you think, Nicoletta? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seemingly futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith.
Mm.
Nicoletta, you have anything on this?
I have goosebumps. I don't
Yeah,
know about you guys, but I,
me
I
too.
I I literally felt goosebumps, like my heart's beating a little faster. I went into the emotional memory of the girl that came into the, rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the first time I read this, I didn't have that experience. It's like you were selling me something that was just so foreign, and it was so far. It felt distant, unreachable, a little bit like a fairy tale, you know? I had a lot of skepticism and doubt because I was so broken by the failed system of my own thinking and the way I perceived life. And it was a really narrow, small bubble I lived in. And then, I come here, and before the experience, this wasn't alive, what we just read. But after the experience, and as I've lived this experience, this gives me goosebumps, because what at one point seemed just like a fantasy, or so foreign, or so far, or so distant, became a way of life. And if you break it down, like, number one, in the last 17 and a half years I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, I mean, there isn't an AA member that's grateful, that's done this work, that does not mention their relationship with their own God, right? With this, like, higher power, no matter what they call it, right? They all praise and give gratitude for their sobriety, their spiritual awakening to this thing that's of spiritual nature, right? To having faith, to having trust, to having belief, and things like that. And that's been the case for me. What do we all have in common? I'm tapped into a place within myself, deep within myself, that I haven't been able to tap into before. It was there. I wasn't there. But that place was there. God was there. Just I wasn't there. The power was there. Just I wasn't there, really. And uh, that, as a result of coming to believe in a power greater than myself, which is a process in itself, that's a step two, right? I'm willing, I'm in, I'm leaning in, I'm going forward, I'm taking a step forward. Take a certain attitude toward that power. What was the attitude that I took toward that power in step three? I wanted attitude. That was the attitude. I'm willing, I'm in. Okay. And to do certain simple things. What were the certain simple things I did? The rest of the steps. I wrote inventory. I shared honestly. I got as vulnerable as I could. I kept no secrets. I I had an experience with each step, and then each step empowered me to have an experience with the next step. And the next thing you know, here was a girl that suddenly was having a different experience with life, a different experience with people around me, a different experience with my own inner being. And I didn't know where that came from. That change came over me. I didn't will that change because all of my efforts to change in the past, to manage and manipulate and control life and myself have failed. They were feeble. They were very short lasting, very fleeting. And here something was churning. It's like a spiritual surgery. And one of my favorite speakers says, get on the operating table, don't play doctor, and don't get up. I mean, that is the perfect summary for me of the 12-step process and the work we do. Like, get on the operating table, don't play doctor, and don't get up. You know what I mean? And as a result of that willingness and that kind of like radical vulnerability to go all in, I get to be transformed. I get to be transformed by having this experience with this work and tap into places within me that I really didn't even think existed. A depth of my own being. So, and what do they call it? A revolutionary change in my way of living and thinking. This is why when we qualify, I think the book says what we were like, not what it was like, what we were like, what happened, and what we're like now. It's from the perspective of me, how I saw life before, how I see life now. Why does common sense become uncommon sense after having this transformation? Because my perspective has shifted. There's a change in perspective. There's a change in the way I relate to life and to people. What's important, what has meaning, what has purpose, what fulfills me. I am more connected to my own self from the neck down. There's that sixth sense, there's that integrity, there's that um, sense of presence when I'm in the present moment. All of this are like the byproducts of this awakening. And I mean, it's awakening, right? I mean, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, it implies, and I always say this, that implies that I was asleep. So what I was like is I was asleep. Then I have this spiritual surgery. I'm open to this spiritual surgery. And then there's an awakening. It's like two lives. I feel like I've had two lives, one before the 12 steps and one after the 12 steps. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, this needed to be true, though. As long as I had an ace in my pocket, this was not true. As long as I thought that I could do something about it, about my drinking or my life, as long as I thought that I had some power, that self-will was sufficient or self-knowledge was sufficient, this wasn't true for me. But thank God, because of my first step experience, this was true for me. And as a result of doing this work, I did find a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction that flows in me, that I sense within me, that operates through me, that I sense the presence of. When did this happen? Here's a condition. I wholeheartedly is an intention. And I think, we talk about mechanics a lot and we talk about how to do things, but I think we miss the energy behind it. And I think the energy behind the step work we do is way more important than how many columns and did you do this, you know, shortcomings and you forgot to put a comma there. No, it's the intent. I think my sincerity, my genuineness, my willingness was more important than how many columns I had and how many pages I wrote. It was more important that I had no secrets, and that I completely nakedly was like emotionally naked in front of my sponsor during that fifth step, you know, craving, hungry for an experience, for a change. That moved more mountains for me, in my experience, I believe, than just reading this book or doing the work mechanically, so to speak. And so these conditions that I want to underline when we read the book, and I always do, is these conditions of the heart. It's more like an energetic way. How am I approaching this work? How I approach the work is, I think, more important. And so, am I doing this wholeheartedly? Until I wholeheartedly met the few simple requirements, which I understand is the steps. Was I once confused and baffled by futility of existence? Yes, I wanted to kill myself. I wasn't even 27. I mean, that was my conclusion of life. My conclusion of life and myself was, this sucks. I'm out of here. I can't do this. And I don't want to do this. That's the best that I could do by the age of 27. What's the point? No purpose, no meaning. They, who's they? AA members showed the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going on life. Oh my God, I was so serious. Oh my God, everything was a drama. Now it's like way more comedy than drama. You know, even drama is funny now. You know what I mean? Anybody that knows what I'm talking about knows what I'm talking about. But like, yeah, like stepping on toes of others, and I would be sensitive to everything and sensitive to criticism, and everything was taken so seriously, and everything would be so heavy, and I would think about it for nights and nights and not get any sleep over it, and drag it and drag the resentment, and the fear would grip me, and I was filled with anxiety, and what's around the corner, and who's gonna know, and what they're gonna see, and oh my God, it's exhausting. I mean, no wonder I drank myself to death. I was exhausting. The self is exhausting. The way I perceived things was exhausting, you know? Just everything. So, and you can feel that energy too, right? We can feel that energy. I mean, in newcomers, and we can just generally feel it in people when everything is just so brainstorming and heady and heavy. And, where's the joy? Where's the just relax? Is your body relaxed? Like, this is the kind of stuff I want to talk about too. Like, because sometimes, we don't know the experience that they're having, but I can see the, what's the American saying? Proof is in the, proof is in the pudding. No, pudding is in,
The proof is in the
see it
pudding.
by
That's
the
right.
branches, by the flowers, by the, you plant something, but then you only see if it's successful, if it blooms, right? Just, we got to look at, like, what's your energy like after having these experiences? Are you walking a little lighter through things and through life as they happen? Do you see that they happen to everybody? Are you accepting life on life's terms? Are you trying not to change life? Leaving aside the drink question, I love that they say this. That's like, okay, let's put that to the side for now, right? They tell why living was so unsatisfactory, right? They show how the change came over them. What a great, great statement. Change comes over me. I don't create the change. I don't will the change. I don't change myself. As a matter of fact, a sincere prayer in me is to be changed, to
Mhm.
be changed. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. And once I started having this experience, my eyes changed, my vision changed, and my perspective changed. And then I saw what I saw before, but I like kept denying it and I kept arguing with it. I saw this like lightness, sweetness, simplicity in people of faith. And we would watch this. We would even watch this on TV, like great disasters would occur, and people would be like, God will take care of us, we trust. And I remember just sitting with a bottle. I mean, literally, I would have a bottle of whiskey watching this stupid TV and arguing with them. And they had more peace than me. They lost a house to a major disaster, and they had more faith and they had more trust that they will be taken care of. They had more peace in them than me sitting in my apartment in New York City, loaded with booze, arguing with their faith. All of these memories swelled up for me as I read this. Not just in early recovery, but more importantly, after I started having an experience. And then as I read the book to others and continued to study the book, these words became more alive for me.
Wow, that was awesome. I love everything you said and broke down every sentence. So Nicoletta, thank you, and thank you for your honesty. That was great. I have nothing to add, so I'm going to keep reading. That was beautiful. Okay. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical hearsays. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as we were the ancients about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. I know that's a lot, two big paragraphs, but Nicoletta, the floor is yours.
Oh man. Okay. Just here's how I see these two paragraphs. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a lot to say on it, really, except this. It talks about possibilities. Right? This whole step two, this whole we agnostics, it keeps saying in many different ways over and over again, using various examples, set aside your prejudice. How can I say that differently and what that meant for me? Stop listening to your mind. Stop believing your mind. Do you really know anything? Tell the truth. Do you know anything? And I had to tell the truth. And I was faced with this question of wanting to know the truth. And a couple of things happened for me. Number one, I couldn't bet my niece and nephew. I couldn't bet my niece and nephew's life that what I thought about God and what's possible and what's available was true. When it was posed to me by my sponsor, I'm willing to give up their lives. I paused a long time. Did I really know? No, I didn't know. Did I know the existence of God, non-existence of God? Is it possible for me? Is it not possible for me? Can I have this experience? Can I not have this experience? I had no idea. What I did know is that I didn't know. I knew that much. I knew that I messed my life up. I knew that I was cornered and in pain. And I knew that number one, my sponsor was an example of Alcoholics Anonymous and what was possible. And I loved that. And I loved that about sponsorship relationships because she was the most tangible, closest, intimate example of what's possible. And I trusted her and I felt safe with her and she believed. She believed and she verbalized while giving me dignity and freedom and respect to have my own experience. That left me curious, it left me willing, and it left me open. I also could not deny that many of you, as I sat in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I sat in big book studies, and I sat at workshops, and I sat at speaker meetings, exuded a level of stability and simplicity and happiness and freedom that was very attractive to me. And you guys were sober, and you were sober longer than me. And you were talking about God, and you were talking about power, and you were talking about step work. And so when those two things were happening while I was reading this book that I didn't agree with, and I didn't like, and I didn't understand, and I didn't have an experience with, I was left with nothing but the willingness to step into this, to lean in and be willing to continue. What was the rule? Don't listen to your mind. When I had doubt, this is a story I like to say a lot. It's one of those, like, when you have a good story and then you realize everybody else likes your good story. So you end up saying that good story every time. Well, here is my story. I'm in a sober house. I'm broke. I have maybe 90 days sober. I'm using a payphone to call my brand new sponsor as we're on step 2. I give her a call on this payphone and I go and I tell her, listen, I have doubt. I have serious doubt about this whole thing. Like, as I'm calling from a payphone while I'm living on a bunk bed, top bunk, and I'm like trying to find a job. I don't even know what county or town I'm in. Okay. I'm in a state I don't even know, in Jersey. I've been in Jersey in a blackout. I'm using a payphone. I'm like 28 years old, 27, 28 years old, calling my sponsor from a payphone in a sober house where I live on a top bunk to let her know how I have doubt about this higher power thing and this step 2 thing that we're reading about. And she, in her loving way, she paused and she got quiet on the other line. And so I was like waiting for the Yoda to speak. And suddenly she says, doubt the doubt. And like my mind just exploded. I mean, it was like a spiritual awakening right there in front of the payphone. I think like literally I have goosebumps right now because that changed the trajectory of how I approached this prior to the experience as I read it. And you know what was another thing that was so important? That was the same mind that tried to kill me. That was the same mind that told me that I could drink successfully. That was the same mind that told me I could drink like a lady when I never had an experience of drinking like a lady. Why would I believe that mind to inform me about life or about power or about what this book was saying? On September 14, 2006, I should have been dead. Here was January of 2007, and I was in a sober house in New Jersey. I didn't pick the sober house. I didn't pick the sponsor that ended up in front of me. None of it. It was all given to me. It all came my way. I was being taken care of better by putting myself in other people's, uh, uh, putting my will in my life over to the care of others. They ran my life better than I ran my life. In those 3 months of me not having much preference and just going with the flow, kind of, I was better taken care of than doing my own life. So those were the examples that sustained me at this part of the book. But what they're saying is, I don't know what they're saying. You got to ask them what they're saying. But here's my opinion about what they're saying. Lay aside prejudice, stop believing the mind. Believe in possibilities. I think these 2 paragraphs are about possibilities.
Beautiful. No, that was great. That was awesome. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading. The bedevilments are coming up, so maybe we'll read till the end of the bedevilments. All right. Thank you, Nicoletta. That was beautiful. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new? By the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? Oh my gosh, cell phones. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. That goes hand in hand with what you just said, Nicoletta, about doubting. Like, we had to stop doubting the power of God and start doubting the doubt, right? Like, I love what you said there. And I'm gonna let you go, and I mean let you talk on this because I just want more of Nicoletta. So please,
Oh man. Okay, so here's what they call a really juicy part of the book. Page 52. I always heard about page 52.
yeah,
Yeah. And I remember in early recovery, turning these things into statements and into questions and asking myself and doing the unmanageability exercises and really like checking my internal climate. But the truth is, this is what I'm like when I'm disconnected, when I'm living in the smallest room, locked up in a big house. And I don't even know that there's more space outside of that room. When I'm just so disconnected from any deep connection or relationships to others, disconnected from my heart, from the depth of my being, from my intuition, when my body is so tight that I'm so wrapped up in my head and the stories in my head that's narrating negatively and resentfully and bitterly and selfishly about what I have or don't have and what I should have, that's really not in the present moment, but it's taking inventory of the past and it's afraid of the future and things like that. So, this is what I'm like when I'm in mental anxiety, when I'm so wrapped up in self. And self is, insecure.
Mhm.
It's insecure, it's small, it's a voice in my head that just wants to think that it's in control of life because life is vast and it's insecure. It's not manageable. Life is not manageable. And my self wants to manage it. It wants to manage what can be managed. It wants to control what it can be controlled. And so, I devise strategies and plans on how to make every move that I make. And I usually step on the toes of others and they retaliate seemingly without provocation. And then I have some ideas about that. And usually they're not very nice. And then I can't stop thinking about it, and nor can I sleep well. And then, I want to get even or I feel sad and depressed, and then I want to drown my sorrows and I need some relief. And no matter how you put it, like I'm so tightly wound up when I live in my head that I need relief. And the truth is, this is what I suffer from. I mean, they call this, spiritual malady, untreated alcoholism. The second part of the step one that talks about unmanageability. It's not so much the external unmanageability, it's the internal unmanageability. We need to be checking what's my inner climate like, what's my relationship with myself and with life and with others. How do I move? Do I move with ease? Am I light? Am I open? And is it safe to be in my presence? Is it enjoyable to be in my presence? Am I considerate of others? Am I moved to give? Am I open? When I'm thinking about myself and what's in it for me, when I'm wrapped up in my head, I just don't show up like this. I don't. And the fear doesn't show up like this. Anxiety doesn't show up like this. It just doesn't. It never will. That's why it's anxiety and that's why it's fear. When I go there, when I feel not in control, and everything in me wants to be in control because it wants that kind of security because I don't trust. And this is why it's like either fate or this. Because fate is like, it's unknown. Like nothing is promised, anything is possible. Like, I need to trust that the way things are exactly the way they're meant to be, and they're perfectly designed for my awakening. And it doesn't matter, is it my karma or is it destiny or is it like, at any moment, I need to value more how I move rather than how others move. That nothing is happening to me, it's just happening.
Mhm.
It's just happening. Life is just happening. But this was an important exercise in early recovery. I think it was one of those moments when, I had a little bit of like a shift, because like any good alcoholic that comes into AA, I just thought you're going to teach me how not to drink. I knew other things were an issue, but I thought they were just human stuff and everybody else suffered from them. But I just needed to resolve this, like, drinking issue. And as I started to do this work, I saw that the ism that I suffered from was really inside of me, and it manifested in all of these ways. And then in 17 and a half years of sobriety, I got to experience this as well without a drink in various ways and moments in my life, seasons and moments where I can delude myself, or I can get tight, or I can lose that faith, or I can just like get delusional and things like that, lose perspective. And am I having trouble with personal relationships? I had no personal relationships when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I had no trouble because none existed. Literally, there were none. Zero. Zero. I couldn't control my emotional natures. I mean, I was just like, mine said left, I went left, mine said right, I went right. I felt some sort of way. It was it was like I was just like prey to like these emotions and feelings that I couldn't even explain. I was prey to misery and depression. I mean, I was incredibly unhappy and lonely and depressed and sad and miserable and bewildered and confused and lost and just heavy. Life was heavy. I couldn't make a living. I worked. I went to school in some ways externally. I looked successful, but I see today that what they mean by this, and I think what they mean by this in the way I read it, is that I can't successfully meet life. I can't successfully meet life. One wrong move and I don't have the tolerance. I didn't have fortitude. I didn't have spiritual fortitude, persistence, tolerance, patience for like the drama of life, which was guaranteed in anybody's life, because that's what life provides at times, challenges and trials and tribulations and grief and losses and things like that. I had a feeling of uselessness. I was completely isolated and lonely. I was not creative at all. I was filled with fear, and this word fear was just so weird for me. So I always would say mental anxiety, chatter in the mind. It was nonstop. I couldn't sleep. I had to drink myself to passing out. I was unhappy and I couldn't really be of real help to other people. I mean, I can't even say that that was on my agenda list of like wanting to do that. I can't really say that I was striving for that, but like they threw that in there as almost they knew that that was non-existent in my life, right?
Right.
For me, this is to bedevilments. I think the explanation was I have it written here in my original big book, to torment maliciously, mildly miserable, and like a meat grinder.
Ooh.
I like that one, like a meat grinder. It's just like ever-present discomfort. But what I really love is the best explanation of spiritual malady for me that really speaks to me is that I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And that to me are the greatest three words that describe me and my internal climate when I'm not living in the solution, when I'm not having faith, when I'm not trusting life, when I don't have a higher power that I find safety and comfort in, and when I don't live in the present moment. By the way, this is me when I'm not present. My body's present, but my mind is somewhere else. It's in the future, or it's reminiscing about the past. And I think the spiritual awakening is really bringing us to here. It's bringing us to this moment. It's bringing us to be here, be curious about life, be open, be like excited about what the next moment brings, and be willing to have that experience no matter what it is, without labeling it and judging it and narrating it in your head. But when it's narrated in my head, I live in a virtual reality somewhere else. And it tends to be not a very hospitable place. I don't invite you over and you don't want to come, you know? So, and then I'm just gonna comment one more thing, and I'm gonna stop. I'm sorry, I'm on a roll now. There's
No,
lots
you're great.
here, but I just want to share this from this book. Once again, the book says some really awesome stuff that's out there for those who haven't had an experience using this like really fancy English, old English and all that, and some wild examples. But then the very next paragraph, they say something so simple. I don't want to forget the simplicity of this program. When we saw others solve their problems by simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe. You were the example. The book was not the example. You were the example. Without you, there would be no me continuing with the book. Without my sponsor sitting in front of me with a different energy and so attractive that made me curious, I wouldn't be really as interested in these words and what they were pointing to. The book only became alive after I had the experience. The book was Japanese weird stuff before I had the experience. But once I had the experience, I fell in love with it. It's a love story with the big book only after the experience. I had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Forget that the God idea does work. My idea didn't. I know that. I know that my idea didn't. Right? So how do I know that God idea does? Because mine doesn't. How do I know to believe in an infinite power rather than finite self? Because finite self is finite. It's by negation. It's by having the experience that I've had up until that point. I've had everything I needed by the age of 27 to believe in these words. I just didn't have, I needed my sponsor to reframe and point the experience to what he was telling me. Because there was just so much mental anxiety in my head that was preventing me from seeing the truth that was already present. My idea didn't work. Self-reliance didn't work. So even if I don't have the experience necessarily yet with the God idea or with the finite self, right? I do have an experience that my way didn't work. What does that leave me with? To have a different or new experience. And why would I have it? Because you did. You did. And you had way more sober time than me. And some of you were really happy. Some of you were weird, absolutely bizarre. But some of you were like really attractive, really. And you loved this work and this book and you loved your God. And I was like, okay, I like her. She's cool. One of them is in this room. Chris, not to point you out. I was a newcomer in recovery going to his meetings. I mean, that Tuesday meeting sustained me. I looked forward to that meeting for 6 days. For 6 days, I was like a crazy newcomer in a sober house on a top bunk, you know? And then I would live for the Tuesday night meeting because I felt the magic of other AA members. I felt their passion and enthusiasm. I couldn't believe how much they believed. I couldn't believe how they talked about this work. I couldn't believe the miracle of healing that they were talking about. It was moving. I wanted more. I got curious. It was attractive. And I think that was, it's a combo. It's like there's a few ingredients in this soup for it to really taste delicious. You know what I mean? And so that was my recipe. Thanks for letting me share.
Nicoletta, thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was beautiful, and we finished off right after the bedevilment. So next week we'll pick up on the Wright brothers, the bottom of page 52. I really appreciate you coming tonight and your passion and your just openness and vulnerability. I definitely look up to it. And thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll have some time if anyone has any questions or wants to share anything.